In this video, I'm going to open another example. It's called MultiTrack Sequencer Record, and it shows various ways of recording into the multitrack. Before we use the interface, I'll go to the Modules and Channels window and look at the MultiTrack sequencer. In this example, MultiTrack Sequencer 1 controls all the other modules, so you can record a performance played through it. Track 1 is a note track and all the other tracks are controller tracks. All the tracks are currently set to monitor on and record on. If I go to track 1 inputs and outputs, we can see it's a note track and it listens to MIDI notes on all channels. It outputs them to WaveSynth 1. If we look at channel 1, there's WaveSynth 1 going through AmpSim 1, which is an amplifier simulator, and then it goes into JPverb 1, which is a reverb. If I open the MIDI keyboard tool window, I can test out the MIDI response. I'll close it again for now. In this example, the notes are being played by Step Sequencer 1. If I click on Step Sequencer 1 and go to the Outputs tab, we can see that MIDI loopback is on and it's sending out MIDI notes for each step. The MIDI notes then trigger the MultiTrack sequencer, which in turn triggers WaveSynth 1. If I press Start, you can hear it working. I'll stop it for now and go back to the MultiTrack sequencer. I'll go to track 2 inputs and outputs. The Input Select pop-up menu shows various possibilities for controller tracks: MIDI, modulation input and direct input. Track 2 listens to the MultiTrack sequencer's modulation input number 1, and it sends the data to the Modify 1 parameter of WaveSynth 1. If we look at channel 2, you can see there's LFO1 being sent directly to the MultiTrack sequencer's modulation input number 1, and that of course is what is the input to track number 2. If I click on WaveSynth 1, we can see that the LFO is being sent to the Modify 1 parameter and it's moving. I'll go back to the MultiTrack sequencer again. And I'll go to track 3 inputs and outputs. This track listens to the direct input slider and it outputs data to WaveSynth 1's filter frequency. If I move the direct input slider, it shows the equivalent filter frequency in the box Output Module 1. If I now click on Design Interface and select the 2D slider, in the widget actions, if I change it to Y-axis, we can see it's controlling the MultiTrack sequencer Set Track ID 1003 direct input. The track ID is used here because it always stays the same even if you change the order of the tracks. So if I now go back to the MultiTrack sequencer, we can see that for track 3, the track ID is 1003. So this matches up with the 2D slider on the interface. Now let's go to track 4 inputs and outputs. This track also listens to the direct input slider. Here it is being controlled by the X-axis of the 2D slider on the interface screen. It outputs its data to WaveSynth 1's filter resonance parameter. Now I'll go to track 5 inputs and outputs. This track listens to MIDI pitch bend data on all MIDI channels, and it outputs this to WaveSynth 1's pitch bend parameter. Finally, I'll go to track 6 inputs and outputs. This track listens to the direct input slider, which is controlled by a vertical slider on the interface screen. it outputs data to AmpSim1's mix parameter. So we've now seen how all the tracks are connected up. I'll now go to the Run Interface window so we can try it out. The green button will start just the step sequencer so we can try out the interface before recording. But for now, I'll use the Record button to make a quick recording. I'll stop it for now, and then I'll go back to the MultiTrack sequencer. If I show all tracks, we can now see that all the recorded data from our performance has been recorded in, and then we can edit any of the tracks if we need to. Lastly, if you click on the Help button, there's much more information about the MultiTrack sequencer there.